who's a Middle East cultural expert and author of My House in Damascus, an inside view of the Syrian revolution. Diana, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, it was fascinating to watch over the weekend, the sort of the speed with which the revolution kind of took hold, and thankfully the fact that it wasn't really particularly bloody. You know, Bashar al-Assad has left, he's gone and got asylum in Moscow. I guess the question everybody's asking now is what happens next?
Well, this is it. I mean, it's been so seismic the last few days. Nobody saw it coming. We weren't sure what on earth was going on and whether it would come to a rapid halt. Everybody was terrified about the airstrikes starting again, of course. Although the rebels were being welcomed as in many places, they were terrified about the airstrikes that they'd of course had to endure for so many years before. So yeah, it's just been absolutely astonishing, and all my Syrian friends are just over the moon about it all. It's still in a state of complete disbelief, really.
Yeah. And I mean, how was it so easy to get Assad to step aside? Because I mean, he hasn't exactly shown any mercy in the past, has he? Suddenly, he was able to leave town, get on a plane. Most of his, or many of his advisors and many of his supporters got on planes as well and got the hell out. How did they manage that?
Well, I mean, Assad, for people who know it well and who've followed it a long time, Assad has always been a hollow shell. I mean, the man is so weak, it's unbelievable. I'm actually a qualified graphologist, and one of the things that I did, about nearly 10 years ago now, was to get a sample of his handwriting, and the man is just so weak and confused. You know, unlike his father, who had a genuine sense of vision, Bashar has just never had that. He's a weak guy. He suffers from all sorts of inferiority complexes, unable to live up to his father's. So he's been guided. He's never been the backbone of the Assad regime. He's been a kind of puppet, you know. But he's been propped up by all these other people who are just propping him up for their own interests. And of course, recently, Syria has become this huge narco state with the production of Captagon, this horrible drug that's been flooding all over the Middle East, and it's been an absolute money spinner for him and all his elite. And it's been run by his brother, Maher al-Assad, who is really beyond the pale, and talk about violence, you know. I mean, Bashar has never got his hands dirty in that sense, you know, but he is an astonishingly weak guy. And so I always knew he would never, if ever he was really under threat, he would run for the hills. Right.
As he has indeed done. But I guess a lot of people are asking the question as to whether Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, this new group of rebels, which appears to be the umbrella group at the moment, it's not clear whether there's other groups involved as well, but whether they are, shall we say, kind of house-trained more than they were some years ago when they were involved in some pretty grisly stuff.
Well, remember, they've actually had, I mean, I personally have faith in them, because they've had some years many years actually, about 6 or 7, 8 years even, to get used to running a government. So in Idlib, where they've been since they were all displaced from elsewhere, they have actually set up a sort of government in waiting, if you like. It's got ministries, it functions, you know, it's got, and during things like COVID, they were actually the most efficient at vaccinations and treating people during the earthquake. They helped people afterwards to rebuild buildings, you know, using their own affiliated companies. They've even rebuilt churches. You know, they've learnt lessons, and so they've come a long way. I mean, I'm not saying they're perfect, but they've come a long way. And I think that there's a genuine sentiment that all Syrians, and Syria has always been a mosaic of societies, you know, I mean, 70% Sunni Muslim, but then there are all these other smaller groups, you know, 15% Alawi, which is what Bashar al-Assad's group is, and then about 10% Christians, and then a mix of you know, many others, of Druze, Ismailis. So it's always been this multicultural, sort of multi-religious mosaic of a place, which is what makes it such a wonderful place. And in my experience of it, that's why I love the country so. It's just so unlike anywhere else in the Middle East. So when people talk about it, oh, it's all going to collapse in a mess, like Libya, like Iraq, I don't think it will, because it's different. Syrian society is different. It is naturally more tolerant and more, there's a huge sense of cohesiveness about being a Syrian, a huge pride in being a Syrian. So personally, I'm very optimistic that, obviously there will be bumps along the road. I'm not saying it's all going to be completely smooth, but I do think that with the right leadership, everything is possible. So even all these horrible problems that will exist on the ground, I mean, you've got basic things like the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham area, obviously supported by Turkey from the beginning, is functions under the Turkish lira, and the rest, old regime Syria under the sort of flailing Syrian lira, which is completely collapsed, and so you've even got two different currencies functioning in the same country. You've got different universities functioning in the same country. So you've got students at Aleppo University wondering how on earth they're going to finish, how they're going to finish their courses, and they've got separate universities in Idlib. People having parallel qualifications. All this has got to be somehow brought together, but it can happen. I mean. Think of East Germany and West Germany, where you've got parallel places. It takes time. It will take time, but my goodness, the will is there, and the will is really there for all the displaced people, all the people who had to leave for fear of being conscripted into Assad's army, the ones that all came to Europe, and indeed into Turkey. They can all go back now. They've been. And
do you think they will go back?
I really do think many of them will go back, because they're being made to feel unwelcome where they are now. And even in Turkey, nowhere has been better to Syrian refugees than Turkey. But even in Turkey now, because it's become a domestic problem for Erdogan, even, he's been trying. I mean, and personally, I think a lot of this is to do with Erdogan behind the scenes, trying to find a way of getting his own Syrian refugees back to Syria. And this will be his moment. My goodness, he's going to get a lot of Syrian refugees going back from Turkey, which will solve a lot of his domestic issues, just the same as it will for us in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the Russians? I understand they've still got 2 military bases in Syria. I don't know how well manned they are, if you like, but what will happen to them?
Well, these are extraordinary things, because they're on these incredibly long leases. The Russians really milked Syria. They've also got this contract to explore and drill for the oil, which is along the Syria's coastline there. People forget how much Mediterranean coastline Syria has actually got. Yeah. And the Russians thought they were made. They've done a complete asset strip of Syria. So in a sense, there's nothing more they can get out of Syria. Except for these 2 bases, which, of course, they'll be keen to hang on to. I mean, Assad's meant to have flown out of the airbase, Hmeimim, which is near Latakia. That's his sort of stronghold anyway, where the Alawites mainly are concentrated. But, personally, I think there'll be some sort of negotiation, but I would hope that they'll slowly, in an orderly fashion, start to close down. Yeah, that would be my hope, and I don't see why.
And that would be strategically damaging to them, because they've always wanted that warm water port there, haven't they?
Absolutely, and then of course everything that's in the Eastern Mediterranean then has to pass through the Bosphorus to get back up into Russian territory, up into the Black Sea. So. This gave them a real strategic foothold, and was a stopping point for when they fly off and do things in Africa. So I can't imagine that any Syrian government is going to want Russian bases on their territory, given the amount of ordnance that fell from Russian jets during these last 9 years. When Russia entered the war in September 2015, it did nothing but bomb the hell out of Syria. And nobody's going to forget that.
No, sure. Good to talk to you. Diana Darke there. Thank you very much indeed. Middle East cultural expert, author of My House in Damascus.